There is a kind of strength that doesn't roar, but trembles quietly behind a practiced smile. You can see it in the eyes of people who say, "I'm fine," with a tone too even, too careful. They carry the world as if it were light, even when it presses against their ribs like a stone. Their laughter sounds normal, their conversations are polite. Their days look ordinary, but beneath the surface is an exhaustion that words can't quite reach. These are the people who pretend to be okay. They show up to work, answer messages, check in on others, all while nursing a silent ache that rarely finds a listener. They're not trying to deceive anyone. They're trying to survive. They've learned that the world rewards composure and recoils from pain, that vulnerability, though honest, often makes others uncomfortable. So they stay quiet, smile a little wider, and keep their cracks hidden under the appearance of calm. And the most painful part, they're often so good at pretending that even they start to believe it. The performance becomes identity. The facade becomes home. But behind the "I'm fine," there's always a whisper. "I wish someone could see that I'm not." Behind the quiet act of pretending lies a complex psychological mechanism. Not weakness, but adaptation. The mind, ever ingenious in protecting itself, learns to suppress emotion when emotion once led to punishment or rejection. Many who habitually say, "I'm fine," grew up in environments where sadness was seen as dramatization, anger as disrespect, and fear as immaturity. So the child learned early. Safety is found not in expression, but in concealment. This suppression evolves into emotional control so refined that even inner turmoil feels muted. The nervous system, once overwhelmed by pain or unpredictability, constructs barriers to keep distress manageable. Psychologists often call this emotional numbing, a defense that spares the individual from being consumed by feeling, yet quietly disconnects them from their own truth. Over time, they become fluent in emotional translation, turning despair into tiredness, loneliness into busyness, and anxiety into responsibility. But beneath these adaptive behaviors lives a quiet form of learned helplessness. When past experiences teach that vulnerability changes nothing, that crying, explaining, or asking for help only deepens shame, the psyche withdraws into self-containment. "I can handle it" becomes the mantra, not because they want to be heroes, but because hope once felt dangerous. And so, pretending to be okay is not merely an act of denial. It is a trauma-informed skill. It is the body's way of saying, "I cannot afford to fall apart." It is a negotiation between survival and authenticity, between the need to belong and the fear of being too much. There is a paradox woven into the act of pretending to be okay. It is both a shield and a prison. The very behavior that protects one from rejection also ensures a life of quiet isolation. By concealing pain, they preserve peace. By maintaining composure, they win approval. Yet each act of emotional restraint distances them a little more from their own humanity. The world may see them as calm, reliable, even admirable, but their inner world often feels hollow, muted, and unseen. To pretend to be okay is to master the art of self-containment. Every sigh is swallowed, every tear rehearsed into a smile. And while this performance may spare them judgment, it also denies them intimacy. For connection cannot bloom where emotion is edited. Others may praise their strength, but few ever touch their truth. They become, paradoxically, surrounded yet unseen. The quiet center of every room, the one who listens deeply but rarely speaks of themselves. This mask is not worn out of vanity, but necessity. It is a way of managing the chaos of existence. To appear stable even when the heart shakes, but the price is profound, a slow estrangement from one's inner world. The longer they appear fine, the more difficult it becomes to admit when they're not. Their own identity begins to merge with the mask, until they no longer know where the performance ends and the person begins. And in this blurring, a subtle grief emerges, not for something lost, but for something never fully lived. The tragedy of pretending to be okay is not only that no one sees the pain, but that the person themselves forgets what it means to be seen. Over time, the habit of pretending doesn't just hide emotions, it rewires them. The body begins to associate calmness with safety, stillness with worthiness, and silence with control. What was once a coping strategy becomes a personality. They stop distinguishing between being okay and being numb. The line fades. Their inner world becomes a quiet ocean, smooth on the surface, but void of movement beneath. This is the hidden cost of emotional endurance. The more one suppresses, the less one feels. Joy becomes faint, curiosity dulls, even love turns careful. The self that once felt deeply now measures every feeling against its potential to disrupt stability. To them, peace is not the presence of harmony, but the absence of visible distress. It is a fragile equilibrium maintained by constant self-restraint. They tell themselves, "I've moved on," when in truth, they've merely gone silent inside. They confuse composure with healing, because both look the same from the outside. And yet, this internal stillness is heavy, like holding one's breath for years. The cost of appearing unbreakable is the slow erosion of aliveness. Ironically, the very thing they long for, connection, safety, understanding, can only emerge when the mask falls. But to remove it feels like death, because it means confronting the chaos that has been tightly caged for so long. So they stay poised, smiling, collected, not realizing that their calm has become a coffin for their truest self. At some point, the question begins to echo quietly in the back of the mind. What does it actually mean to be okay? For so long, the word has been synonymous with composure, with not crying, not breaking, not needing. To be okay has meant to function, to meet expectations, to stay consistent regardless of what storms inside. But what if this definition is flawed? What if the pursuit of okayness has become an escape from truth? Modern culture worships self-sufficiency. It teaches us to manage pain, not feel it, to fix ourselves, not reveal ourselves. Emotional control is praised as maturity, while vulnerability is often dismissed as weakness. So people learn to polish their suffering until it becomes invisible. We scroll through curated lives, filled with strength and serenity, and mistake repression for wisdom. The result is a quiet epidemic of people who appear composed, but feel profoundly disconnected from others and from their own hearts. Yet perhaps okay is not meant to be a static condition. Perhaps it is not a plateau of perfect peace, but a living, breathing state of being in flux, sometimes steady, sometimes shattered. Maybe to be human is not to always manage life well, but to remain open to its intensity without shame. The existential question emerges. Is the goal of the psyche truly to be fine, or is it to be whole? Being whole means integrating both pain and peace, shadow and light, despair and renewal. It means allowing contradiction to coexist without labeling one part as failure. If so, the people who pretend to be okay are not broken. They are caught in a misunderstanding of what wellness means. They have mistaken emotional stillness for health, when in fact, real health might sound more like a heartbeat, sometimes steady, sometimes trembling, but always alive. Beneath the surface of pretending lies one of the oldest human paradoxes, our simultaneous need for protection and exposure. We long to be seen, yet fear being seen too much. We crave intimacy, yet build walls of composure so high that no one can reach us. This conflict is not a personal flaw, but an existential truth. To exist is to oscillate between hiding and revealing, between safety and surrender. The mask in this light is not only a defense, but a mirror of the human condition. Every person wears one, at work, in relationships, even in solitude. But for those who pretend to be okay, the mask becomes too convincing, too permanent. It ceases to be a tool and turns into a skin. They forget that it was meant to protect, not define. And yet, there is something profoundly dignified about their silence. In their restraint, there is grace. The grace of those who carry pain without spectacle, who still choose kindness even when unseen. Their quiet endurance reflects a deep moral beauty, the refusal to make the world heavier than it already is. But even noble silence can become a prison when it denies one's need for tenderness. The existential loneliness of pretending stems from this. They yearn for someone to recognize the mask without forcing it off, to look at them and see both the strength and the fatigue behind it. What they seek is not rescue, but recognition, the feeling of being known without having to confess. Authenticity, then, is not the dramatic removal of every mask, but the gentle permission to let small truths slip through. To say, "I'm not fine today," without apology. To allow tears to fall without editing their meaning. These small cracks are not weaknesses. They are portals through which real connection enters. And maybe that is what being human truly means. Not to perform wholeness, but to live sincerely within our fractures. To meet others, mask to mask, until both begin to dissolve in the quiet courage of honesty. Healing begins not with grand confessions, but with quiet honesty. For those who have spent years pretending to be okay, the first act of courage is often the smallest. Admitting to themselves that they are not fine. It is the unlearning of emotional performance. The slow, deliberate permission to feel without needing to justify or disguise. To heal is not to abandon composure altogether, but to let it coexist with truth. Strength is no longer the ability to suppress feeling, but to stay open while feeling it. This is what emotional maturity truly means, to remain gentle with one's pain instead of fighting it into silence. When the mask begins to loosen, life becomes less about endurance and more about participation, less about holding together, more about being real. There's beauty in that return. The person who once smiled to hide begins to smile to connect. Their words grow simpler, their days quieter, but their heart more sincere. They learn that being okay is not an achievement, but an experience that flows in and out of us like weather. They begin to realize that vulnerability does not make them a burden. It makes them belong. And so pretending slowly gives way to presence. Not every truth will be spoken, not every pain shared, but the soul learns that honesty, even in fragments, restores dignity. Because to say, "I'm not fine," is not weakness. It is a reclamation of reality, a gesture of self-respect. In the end, the journey of those who pretended to be okay is not about discarding the mask entirely, but about remembering the face beneath it. It is about living transparently enough to breathe again. And when they do, they discover a gentler kind of peace, not the fragile calm of suppression, but the steady quiet of being seen and still being loved.